Hello and welcome everyone to the Insights 2023 Design Lecture Series. Thank you for joining us this evening. It has been a wonderful experience. The first return to in-person Insights here since, I want to say 2019. So it's really been a joy to be here. My name is Emily McLaughlin. I am the Director of Communications for AIGA Minnesota. And on behalf of AIGA Minnesota, I would like to thank Osley, Mark, Jake, Laura, the whole Walker team for bringing this together so that we could all be here today. For nearly 4 decades, the Walker and AIGA Minnesota have worked together to bring you the Insights lecture series, bringing adventurous design thinkers and makers right here to the Twin Cities. Now, I'm delighted to introduce Jake Usna, content producer here at the Walker Art Center, and Brad Stifler from Extreme Noise.
Hello, everyone. I just want to start by acknowledging that the Walker Art Center is located on the contemporary, traditional, and ancestral homelands of the Dakota people. This site, which we are currently on, which was once an expansive marshland and meadow, holds great meaning for the Dakota, Ojibwe, and indigenous peoples from other Native nations who still live in our community today. I want to just personally thank you all. Some of you are familiar faces through this year of Insights. Some are new just for this evening, but it's been really lovely, as Emily said, to see the design community, as expansive and wild and woolly it is, return and start having a great time together. I want to thank Mary, our absolutely amazing interpreter who's been with us every single in-person Insights. I'd like to thank AIGA, as well as thank Shapco, who for many, many years, including this one, has been kind enough to donate the printing of our posters, which went very fast, but there's still a few floating around. So if you want to mark the occasion, grab them while you can. I just also want to let you know that we have one more online program going on before we end this year's Insights, which is a free workshop on feminist interfaces with the group TenderNet, and that will be happening on Sunday, April 16th, hopefully, at 2 p.m. Thank you, Leslie. And then also, if you guys didn't notice the bar, I don't know if you could miss it, but afterwards we're going to have a reception for everyone to stay in the lobby, meet all our great speakers and everyone from Extreme Noise, as well as enjoy a beverage. And as I kind of mentioned, like on a personal note, it's been really lovely to be a part of the entire team at the design studio at the Walker putting together this edition of Insights. We've really tried to rethink what it means to do design lectures, what it means to be a community, and we're really thrilled after working with Brad and the team at Extreme Noise for a couple of years now to try to make this night happen through lots of conversations, and the fact that the Walker Art Center and Extreme Noise, which are two great, I like to think of as great artistic community centers of the Twin Cities. We're only a few miles apart, but it can sometimes seem like a gulf between us, and so it's really nice to work together to try to rethink how we as a design community, we as the Twin Cities community can work together, even when sometimes the things we're sort of used to don't always lend themselves to it. Like, for instance, our weird, feels like we're giving an Oscar away tonight. That even the podium we're speaking from, isn't set up to have more than one voice. So I just really want to thank Brad. I want to thank everyone from Extreme Noise, and of course, thank all of you, the community, who really make Insights possible. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks. All right, so I do want to start by the same kind of acknowledgement of that gulf or distance between our spaces here. We're just down the street at 407 West Lake Street. But, it does seem for us like we're going to be trying to describe a subcultural scene in a community and a kind of space and a feel and an approach to art and culture that is built upon really different ideas than the ones that the Walker is built upon. And, to think about the ways that difference kind of manifests itself in the kinds of work that we'll see from the artists who are going to share their designs and work tonight, and et cetera. So also importantly, an important disclaimer that I wanted to start with is that I've been introduced as Brad from Extreme Noise. I want to make it clear that I'm not speaking for Extreme Noise or even on behalf of Extreme Noise, but just as one individual who is currently helping to run a punk rock record store right now. And we have about 20 or 30 volunteers, give or take, that are dedicated to the same task. And there have been hundreds, I don't know how many hundreds, since the store was founded 30 years ago. And here's some artwork from one of the very first issues of Profane Existence that came out after the store opened in 1994. And you'll see there's a few bad people with tattoos who are not for sale, who are those volunteers that we're referring to here. And, the hundreds of volunteers since the store began, some people have stayed for less than half of a really boring shift. Some people have stayed for a couple of decades of boring shifts. But a lot of those people are here tonight. And those are people who have swept the floors and filed records and filled out our tax forms and priced a used collection and counted the register and turned off the lights at the end of the night. So when we're thinking about, or when I'm trying to think here about extreme noise, it's to try to describe a little bit of that kind of collective endeavor that the store is involved in. And part of that is that still feel awkward after 15 years of dedicating a couple of hours every week to helping run the store. That I still feel awkward in terms of speaking for the store or kind of trying to be its voice in some way. And I think nobody quite feels comfortable in that role. And that captures something about the store's existence as an institution, its sort of role in the community that will help guide and sort of frame the way that we're talking about it as an institution involved in, sort of producing and being a venue for and a clearinghouse of information, being a kind of meeting point for art and design, et cetera. So I do also want to say that part of that awkwardness about it being an institution that's beyond my control or authorship is bureaucratically true. So for those of you who don't know the store, we have no owners, no investors. Our bylaws don't allow anybody to profit off the store or to make a living from it. All our profits are reinvested into the store or into the local punk community that we collectively decide on various pursuits to support monetarily. And our bylaws require collective approval for nearly everything, whether we want to sponsor a show, like some of the shows that we've sponsored, or whether we want to buy a cake or an oversized sub sandwich for a volunteer picnic. Everything we, sort of goes through that meeting process that are sometimes awkward or uncomfortable. Approval in that sense doesn't always mean consensus or agreement. So as part of acknowledging that when I say we about the store, or when I talk about or describe its characteristics as something that I'm a part of, it's an uneasy or awkward we. I want to acknowledge that part. So when we look at how the store has played a role in, I want to skip this part. So another reason I can't speak for the store is because I wasn't around for the first decade that the store was. I was 10 years old when Extreme Noise started in 1994. But an important part of the store, so this is a flyer that's coming April 1st, 1994, here announcing the store. One of the things that drew me to the store when I moved to the Twin Cities was captured in those three words that are in the bottom third of the flyer here: independent, underground, and alternative. And I want to focus a little bit on those ideas as the kind of animating values or ethos of the store and its approach to thinking about music and subculture and art. And in particular, because it kind of marks a certain idea from the moment that Extreme Noise started. And it's one that had faded away by 2003 when I moved here and a lot of other places, but was still kind of alive at Extreme Noise and drew people like me and others to it. And so let me look at my notes here. So to help paint this picture, I'm going to show some images from some zines from around this time period. I'll show you some images from Profane Existence and Maximum Rock and Roll, which were Maximum Rock and Roll national zine published in San Francisco, and Profane Existence, one published here locally, and a lot of the people involved in its production were involved in the origins of Extreme Noise as well. And when we're thinking here about the kind of idea about alternative art or culture and punk as a kind of autonomous subculture, the 90s were a moment in which some of those lines were being drawn really, brightly. A lot of sort of very clear lines in the sand. This is from a 1992 issue of Maximum Rock and Roll. You can see here that there's this desire to suggest that one thing is entirely clear. Punk has absolutely nothing in common with corporate labels, their opportunism, their anti-democratic structure, and this idea that there was a possibility to create a kind of network of institutions and record labels and show spaces and publish zines and all those sort of things outside of those sort of structures of commercialism, outside of the structures of major label-dominated music distribution, etc. And, this way of constructing an alternative universe is also about a kind of, this idea that those lines could be really clear, that there could be this absolute distinction between the subcultural style, the subcultural alternative institutions, and the mainstream corporate marketplace of culture and art and ideas. And we'll talk about whether those lines make any sense, whether they made sense then or now, but there's something that are really important for the sort of origin story of the store. And this issue of Maximum Rock and Roll from 1994 is the first issue that an advertisement for Extreme Noise appears. It's the June issue of 1994, and you can see taking a bit of an extreme stance towards the sort of moral imperative of dealing with major labels. And you can see an ad here for Kill Rock Stars, a label out of Olympia, that sort of puts it in the Faust puts it in terms of Faust and selling your soul, destroying autonomy, independence, individuality. So this idea that the mainstream was threatening, corrupt, vapid, that it was going to suck the life and soul out of the kind of art and culture that people wanted to support. And interestingly, you'll see here that our ad appears on the same page as a Jawbreaker ad, maybe 2 months before they signed to DGC and became the sort of poster children of sellout culture in 90s punk. There's a clear tension there, right? And something that is sort of marking what's happening in the larger scene that Extreme Noise is coming of age in. And then more clearly locally, we have, I showed this before from Profane Existence, why Minneapolis is so punk. This idea that this was a kind of special place. And this is from a 1992 edition, so this is before Extreme Noise. But already this idea that Minneapolis was a special place for building those kinds of institutions. And zines like Profane Existence, or a zine like Profane Existence, had a section called Fucking Alternative, Fucking Punk Rock that sort of cataloged and detailed a lot of those independent institutions, a lot of the ways in which the ideas about what it meant to be punk was about that kind of distance from corporate distribution channels, etc. You can see it in things like this republished letter from Dan in the Profane Existence Collective, also a founding member of Extreme Noise, writing to Epitaph to let them know how upset he is that they're using corporate distribution channels in Japan, and to say that he's going to bring this issue up at Extreme Noise. Likewise, you see here, just getting a fax from EMI is enough to, to need to republish it and remind people, fuck major labels, we don't want your blood-drenched money. And as an alternative, right, Extreme Noise is presenting itself as, for the kids. And likewise here from that same Profane Existence from the first issue after the opening of Extreme Noise, where it's presented as doing it ourselves, right? Trying to construct an alternative space where people aren't making art or distributing records to make money. They're not doing it for a job or a living, that this is outside of that. Although, interestingly, I'll note that this article does suggest that eventually it's going to become a worker-owned co-op providing sustainable jobs for people. That did not happen. But as a sort of set of animating values, it's something that I think, something I just kind of wanted to paint a picture of here tonight. To be a volunteer-run store with nobody profiting was not just an economic necessity, but was, as I said before, kind of moral and ethical imperative, giving a people a chance to live out a part of their kind of politics in terms of how they made art and participated in the scene. And you know, well, a lot of these institutions from the punk scene aren't around anymore, like Maximum Rock and Roll, for instance, that we saw images of, or Profane Existence zine. But Extreme Noise is, and it was still unique at the time that I sort of first encountered it in 2003, and that really drew me to it in terms of its sort of lofty goals of subcultural autonomy, which I don't want us to think, you know, I'm not trying to suggest that the store ever lives up to them or that it's ever able to sort of stay on that bright line in the sand between corporate commercialism and the underground subcultural alternative. But it is something that I think just as a spirit or a set of utopian notions or something along those lines, it's important to kind of see as the bedrock upon which what we still do works. So to tell us a little bit more about the sort of founding moment of the store and connect it more to the sort of its aesthetics and tell us some of that story, Bill Bolger is going to come and talk about, as one of the founders of Extreme Noise, and we'll talk to us a little bit more about that moment. So.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bill Bolger. I'm one of the co-founders of Extreme Noise. And first of all, I just want to say I'm super honored to talk about basically one of the greatest projects I've ever been involved with. So I'm really excited about this. We're going to keep painting the picture. So this is a 80s punk scene, and a lot of you see this idea and know this idea. But in this period where Extreme Noise formed, it's kind of a strange period. And this 80s punk explosion that a lot of people know had faded. So we're painting a lot of pictures here, but just bear with me as I paint another one. We're talking about the mainstream. So this was a moment before punk had exploded into the mainstream. You know, people who we were around had started to emerge into popular culture, but it was before it had just completely become mainstream. And so that's the moment when Extreme Noise started. But aside from all that, you know, away from the commercial noise, you know, it was about to get really loud. But for us, there's a rebirth of an underground DIY scene after the 80s. The punk scene had become a lot more intimate over the preceding years in a lot of different places. Maybe not the big cities, but especially here in the Twin Cities. So we found inspiration as we traveled. The places we visited, you know, the people we met across the United States, the lasting impressions of these big squats we visited in Europe, massive institutions. And then, of course, the organizing movements that were very large here against war and fascism in the streets of Minneapolis. So we gathered where we could, whether it was basements or back rooms or borrowed spaces. And it was a time when everything really felt like it was happening and it was intimate. So this is also a time when the kind of like first lengthy oral histories of punk were hitting the bookstore shelves. And, you know, they were explaining the early punk movements with some of the high-minded ideas and like the more philosophical underpinnings of punk. They were in the air. So this idea of a scene that evolved from an ever-evolving shop in London on the King's Road, echoing the Situationists, that all resonated at the time. So when we had this idea that it was what was proposed to us, create a shared space that would actually support the music and art that we cared about, it seemed natural to band together as a group. So if you don't like the options that are available, make your own. So in 1994, we gathered in a house, about a dozen people got together to discuss this concept of a collectively run store. And by the end of that first meeting, everyone was committed immediately with our time, resources, energy, imagination. You know, so the idea was contribute what you can, pull in any favors, because the more funds we kind of scrounge together, the more records we can put on the shelves. As Brad said, April Fool's Day sounded like a good day to start this thing. So 3 months, let's go. As we started, we drew inspiration from other projects that had kind of emerged around that same time. We were definitely informed by their successes and their ideas, and we learned a lot from their failures as well. So that was super helpful for us at the time. I want to go back to that first meeting where not everything had been totally perfect for us in that first meeting. We were all in agreement we were going to do this. But the discussion, as we started to talk about what it would look like, took a little detour as we kind of discussed musical preferences and kind of found a few disagreements about the styles of music that we would carry. But almost immediately, for the good of the larger project and the idea, we put our individual preferences aside And we formed this framework based on consensus, wherever possible. We look to find agreement rather than disagreement. We did set clear boundaries on our content. We would not carry racist, sexist, or homophobic bans. That was a clear line, very easy to decide. And we just decided to leave all those musical preferences much more open. So it was a learning moment where we said, we can serve the diverse tastes of the punk and hardcore scene without kind of subverting our personal identities, our personal preferences, no compromise. So as we began that search for common ground, we applied it across the board wherever possible. From musical preferences, it was also visual appearance and everything beyond. So aesthetic was critical. A common visual language can really help to find kindred spirits when you're a little bit off the beaten path. So there was plenty of inspiration. These are just a few examples, but with visuals like this, you know immediately what you're getting. So we were inspired. And it was less technically advanced at the time. We had no money to pay professionals, and we basically needed to create an aesthetic that we could do ourselves and then reuse it over time. So we were experienced with photocopiers, Kinkos, X-Acto knives, cut and paste and rip and tear our art. So that came into the art. Okay, so we started then with a blank canvas. We're creating our own reality. What are we going to do? It's a little intimidating with a blank canvas, so we started with colors that everyone could agree upon. We had black and we had white. But kind of going back to our inspirations, we found common ground in that familiar style. It was bold, utilitarian, recognizable. And another thing is that, it was the 90s and we had that kind of lack of technology. So we chose fonts that were readily available so we could use student labs, Kinkos, places like that. So very basic, very utilitarian. Our sign on Lake Street, we knew it would be kind of small, but we wanted it to be visible for a long, multiple blocks away. So we added a splash of red. And then we gave it a little style to make it our own. And that's what we came up with. So anyway, the final product didn't really, reflect the design preference of any one person. It was kind of a group idea. And it represented us as a group, and it was something we could all rally around together. So with that design finalized, we ordered the first stack of bumper stickers, and we have the same design to this day. Tens of thousands of these stickers, pins, and shirts. You may have seen them throughout the Twin Cities and across the world. They're very recognizable, even when you see it on a wall or on a person walking down the street. So it had that sense of community. We hand-painted our first sign, just as an aside. We borrowed a projector. We got some cans of paint and old paintbrushes. We did it in the back room of the store. And then, Dan from Profane Existence hung it up on the wall there. And I don't know who else was helping him, but he looks like he's going to fall there. So fortunately, he made it through. So along with our stereo, we just had a cash register, fax machine, phone, and then this hand-me-down Macintosh SCU that we didn't really ever use because computers were not really the thing at the time. As we got started that first night, especially the night before we opened, we had this marathon overnight session, and volunteers would handwrite price cards for each record with these personalized descriptions of, passionate advocacy for their favorite records. Every once in a while, there were some things that were not totally factual, but they were pretty entertaining regardless. And then, so I just wanted to talk about this idea, many of these systems were handwritten and manual by design for a reason. It was out of a desire for real simplicity and kind of lowering that training barrier for a new volunteer, because people would just show up off the street and they'd say, "What can I do to help?" And we're like, "Okay, well, help. Here's a card, start writing," or, help us with different things around the store. It was very low barrier to entry, and a lot of that continues to this day. So when the doors open the next morning, this is kind of a time capsule. Looking at this, you can see people you can see styles that you're like, whoa, that existed. But when the doors opened, the physical space found a community, and it was pretty amazing. So just thinking about this time, it was a time of in-person connection. It was before the internet, before social media, and word traveled kind of slowly as people bumped into each other around town. News traveled, hand to hand, mouth to mouth, and folklore evolved through underground zines and just kind of like through stories. So flyers on telephone poles, handbills, they spread the word about shows and also this vibrant scene that we had here in the Twin Cities. So things really started to get rolling at that point. And from that very first day, we were really surprised to see a line out the door when the doors open at noon. We've been open noon to 8 ever since then, and Extreme Noise has become a gathering space. So that's kind of a little bit about how we got started. We're going to take it back to Brad to keep talking about that and tell the story. But thanks for the time.
So like Bill said, I'm going to just talk a little bit more about the store and its sort of current role, still sort of building on that history in the ethos and politics that Bill sort of led off with. So as I want to talk about our mission statement, which is posted above the door on both inside and outside of the store, that frames the store, completely volunteer run, all profits earned are reinvested into the store, to preserve it as a resource for the Minneapolis punk community. And there's a lot of ways that we don't serve as a resource for the community, like giving people jobs, or, if we're thinking here about our concern with art and design at the Walker here, we don't give out fellowships or necessarily, provide consistent employment for artists or anything like that. But one primary way that we are a resource for the scene is by being a physical space that's open, as Bill said, every day, 12 to 8. We have browsers full of records that are full of visual design in all sorts of formats. We have rafters covered in T-shirts that are showing all the different sort of styles and designs from the larger scene. We have, walls and bulletin boards covered in flyers. We have a volunteer pics board. We have a back room full of all kinds of junk, including a flyer archive that one could look through. We have a free shelf where you can find a variety of things on any given day. We have the sights and the smells of the local punk community that you can come and indulge in there. We have a parking lot in the back, which once a year we turn into a flea market to sort of expand our space outside. And there's a lot of different ways that this, having a physical space can serve, a sort of functional way in which art and design can kind of be incorporated into the store. So a sort of an example from the early the 90s period here, one of the Dillinger 4 7-inches, when it came out, the covers weren't printed yet, but it came with a coupon to redeem for the real cover and insert from Extreme Noise Records, sometime after next Friday. But just that way of having that space somewhere that could serve as that resource there, but more sort of concretely, and as Bill sort of mentioned a little bit here, the store's role as a bulletin board, as a place to find flyers, to find out information about what's going on, continues to this day as a kind of really key way in which the store serves the scene, and also a way in which we can kind of provide a setting or a venue for functional types of art. And one example that I want to talk about briefly before turning it over to Joe and Sarah is the monthly calendar of shows, which is available almost exclusively at Extreme Noise. You can see in the bottom right here that copies are available at Extreme Noise. And people come in all the time looking for the new calendar because in some ways, for shows that are happening outside of the, legal venues and places that can be advertised online, it can be the only way to find out about what's happening today. Even today. You can see this is this month's calendar. Our lecture is up there on the 4th, so this is a little bit meta. But the calendar is produced and has been produced by a couple of different people, but Britt Collis shared these with me, who's kind of helps organize it now. But different artists take over every month to design sometimes very different looking calendars, all sort of, again, providing or sort of serving that function of getting out information, of maintaining a kind of physical connection and sort of intimacy of the scene, but doing it in a way that allows people to express, whatever sort of artistic design ideas they might have. and they sometimes get updated. People come in again looking for them, and it's just a kind of an example that I wanted to share in terms of like the ways. Here it is hanging up at the store. I took this picture a couple of hours ago, so you can see that it's been already colored in, so people are kind of engaging in further design ideas, I guess, through through engaging with the calendar. So beyond that example, the store does occasionally actually engage and sort of like ask artists to do work for us in terms of making flyers or t-shirt designs, et cetera. And two of the artists that are going to talk to you tonight about their own work, and hopefully we've kind of set the stage for the larger scene and local community that it takes place in. And so when you're hearing about their individual practices and design ideas and stories about how they do their art and how they think about it, you can kind of think about it in this context. But they've been... here's their names. Joe and Sarah are going to come talk to you. Joe first, but one on the left is a t-shirt design that Joe did for us, and on the right is a flyer for our 20th anniversary show, one of our 20th anniversary shows that Sarah did. And, coincidentally, I didn't know this when we asked them, but Joe and Sarah used to volunteer on the same shift many years ago. So they've been involved in the store, but hopefully their stories will kind of connect with the larger context and environment that we've been talking about. So without more of me talking, I'm going to hand it over to Joe Boyd Brent.
Hey, hello. Okay. Be easy on me and Sarah, please, because we're just artists. Okay. This is, here's a flyer that I made. I guess I'll start by saying I started volunteering at Extreme Noise in 2005 until 2015, so 10 years. I first went probably 2002. Took the bus from St. Paul, took the 21 down Lake Street, got a copy of The Decline of Western Civilization, Part 1 on VHS, then got Crass CDs, Discharge CDs, Exploited, Circle Jerks, all that stuff. But immediately started seeing flyers on the walls, and it was a huge thing. This is I got all these flyers from the flyer archive that Brad mentioned in the back room, and it was just a crazy resource. To see all these, and they all really stuck with me. Like all these techniques that have been talked about, cut and paste, ripping things up, sort of lot of found imagery, but a lot of original art as well, and all of it being really important and really amazing. Also, all finding some way to sort of show the ethos and everything that has been described, like anti-capitalist or anti-technology, anti-whatever. I started seeing this stuff, and I was just a fan, honestly, just loved it so much, and specifically the flyers, just because it seems so. One day it's there, next the show happens, then the flyer's gone, and that's it. But maybe, I remember seeing the first flyer up there, the Forward show, first time I saw a hardcore band from Japan, and that flyer sort of memorializes that occasion for me. So it's these flyers really they really serve a special function. You see these flyers in people's houses or out in the world, and it the physical aspect of it is a really important thing, and I've always really found that. And I thought I'd point out some of these. There's like Akira up in the right-hand corner mixed with Hellraiser. These some horror things, dark imagery, and sci-fi, and all this stuff that really resonated with me. you have like, whatever, all that stuff. It's great. Okay, and then this is some sort of earlier stuff that I did, I guess, when I started to be more serious about it. These are all screen prints, most of them done without any computer, just drawn straight onto the Mylar transparencies, super hand done. Middle one's a little arty, but I put it in there anyway. But you can see you can start to see like tropes that I was just using too, that I had seen in other things, other punk art, and that really called to me, and that brought things out of me, and I really I just really related to all this imagery and wanted to express it myself in my own way. And I think it's really interesting how for me, these I think are maybe me breaking a bit from what I just showed you. Later you'll see things of mine that really look like that first series of flyers I showed. But I think it's this thing in punk where you sort of need these visual cues to let people know what you're a part of and what you stand for, and to like recycle these tropes in new ways and find new ways to tell these messages. That's an important thing in my art, is sort of acknowledging these tropes and keeping it alive in a way. So maybe the one on the left there the first one does a better job of like looking like that old classic stuff all ripped up and things just glued on to each other and degraded and all, really just punk and super DIY and the whole like utilitarian aspect and all that was super important to me. Just more stuff that I made. I don't know what I should say about it. I guess I don't have any notes, I don't think. You can see there's skulls and there's evil police. There's commentary on technology and drone strikes and all this stuff I'm once again, this is just me like as a fan. We saw that the early stuff, the profane existence imagery, it's like I love that stuff so much. I just wanted to like sort of recreate those stories in my own way and just continue to work on it. These are all I printed these all myself, like super DIY. The first one is I printed it on newsprint. They probably have all fallen apart now. It's very, very ephemeral, but I also see some of these in my friends' houses, and it takes me back to being at these shows if I was there, or it's like the physical sort of celebration of these events and these ideas is supposed to be really strong in this stuff. These are some shirts that I made. I guess I included these because I printed these as well, and this is for me something that's really important in punk. Is like seizing the modes of production, and making your band's merch, making everything yourselves or your friends are making it, or it's very like within the culture, and so you have not only all the imagery and everything, but also your the way that you're operating like Extreme Noise is very legit and whatever. I think that's all I need to say about that. Okay. Yeah. So these are flyers that I make that move. Okay. Flyers. I love flyers because they're physical. And in the last, 10 years or 15 years or so, everything has become digital, and where everyone's looking at things on their phones. So the flyers that were once on the walls are now, 2.5 inches wide or whatever on someone's phone, and they just look at it for a little bit, and then they scroll to the next image, whatever. flyers are so important to me that I felt that there must be a way to sort of like make them more special or grab someone's attention more, because otherwise you're just blasting by them, or that these are my theories. So I am pretty anti-technology, and I hate social media, all that stuff. It's in the imagery. I'm sure you can probably pick it out. So yeah, it's ironic to sort of like work within that, but I guess in a way I knew that I had to sort of work within the technology to find some way to eventually do my way of subverting it and bringing it back into the physical realm. And with most of these, like this one that says Scarecrow, that's a screen print that is a flyer that I screen printed and then scanned and then animated the scan of the screen print. So it's you have that tactile thing, and it does exist in reality. That's, I guess, the point of some of these is that there is a real genuine article that exists, and I'll get back to that. But yeah, I mean, blogs and social media really replaced the zines of like MRR even became a blog at one point after being a zine for a long time, and then I think fell apart. So all these old mechanisms, zines and physical things getting taken over in the digital realm is something that I really dislike, because I love the physical nature of the record store, what it's offered me, all the physicality of the culture and this this thing we love I just think it's so important that finding a way to sort of battle the digitization of it and then bring it back into reality is sort of what we're going to look at next. I don't know if you can get service, you can scan that QR code. If you do it, it will show you the animated version of the flyer. This is the screen printed version on the left, and you can see in the bottom corner. So this was the first way that I wanted to start sort of bridging the gap between the digital realm and the physical realm, was creating these flyers and just using QR codes so that you could like have this physical item that was sort of like a portal or a key to this digital thing. Because I see flyers and punk art and everything as a portal, and so to just continue that and make do it utilizing the technology was sort of the idea with this. You can do it with this one too. I hope it works, but maybe it doesn't. But I'll leave it there for a second. Yeah, you can see there's the devil nuking a city. I don't think there's much more. These flyers, I did put some thought into them. I promise that one's a little straightforward, but anyway. Okay, hopefully that worked for you guys with the QR codes. So this is what we're looking at, is like a screen printed flyer on the left, and then the digital version. To me, it also made sense. It's like all these flyers have a lot of commentary. I hope it's pretty obvious. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner this gun that this person was supposedly carrying was actually a teddy bear the whole time. So yeah, using this motion to tell these stories, to like really show the stories, but also to me it also all is very sort of sci-fi seeming, and I just like that too. So yeah, that's for a long time, or for a few years, using these QR codes, bridging this physical reality with this digital reality was something I was doing. But I guess the next step was finding a way to make the whole flyer itself like a key to this digital realm, and to really bridge that gap between reality and digital reality, but also make it so that the physical printed flyer was the genuine article, that the flyers online, all this stuff online is fake. It's not really like when the bombs fly out into the air, when everyone presses the red button, the internet's gone, and we still have these flyers in our bunkers. And so yeah, thinking of how to make the flyer itself this portal, like literal portal, because it already memorializes these events, and you know, these ideas are so internal, but then finding a way to take it even further. Then this next video, this is using like augmented reality. So then the flyer itself, this on the wall, just becomes you know, a digital flyer. So it's like, in a way, then, you know, we're acknowledging the digital realm, but to me, it's sort of like defeating it a little bit, because the physical thing is this portal still, and that's the key. And then here's another one, just doing the same thing. Yeah, and I guess it ties into extreme noise as this physical space that you know, that offered me this portal, and really has given me like this whole visual language to express myself, and you know, yeah, just been such a resource, and the physicality of extreme noise, going through the flyer archive like I did before, seeing flyers on the wall, all of this stuff being such an important part of my artistic process. So that's all. Thanks. Sarah's next.
Oh God. Okay. I moved here from Milwaukee, but I'm from Miami in 2010, and I started going to shows immediately. And I think when I first moved here, there was so many places to go to shows. There was like 30 punk houses and warehouses and theaters and all these things, and it just felt completely insane how much creativity already existed in this city when I got here. And I don't even remember how I started volunteering at Extreme Noise, but it was pretty soon after I moved here. And strangely, me and Joe were on the same shift. I don't think we even knew each other. And yeah, I don't know. And then, sorry, it's hard. I've never done this. Okay, so the first picture is an Extreme Noise shirt that I made for them during the first couple months of COVID, I think. Like, we all started doing fundraiser t-shirts to raise money for the store. And then the second one is from a t-shirt I did for Record Store Day 2016. Same concept, just trying to help raise money. And as soon as I started meeting people and going to shows and volunteering at the store, I feel like I started to feel comfortable, and then started maybe like showing that I did art, or like wanting to contribute with art. And the first flyer, okay, wait, I'm not in flyer section. Never mind. So, whatever. I started volunteering, and I've divided everything into like a few sections. So Extreme Noise is a hub, going there, meeting people. I guess it led to just being able to like represent myself as an artist. So then I started doing things to, I guess, engage in the community in a way, because I've been involved in the punk scene my whole life, but like could never play an instrument. So I just wanted to do art to be a part of it, I guess. And so like the first image was a fundraiser for a t-shirt for the Battle Train, which is like the punk part of May Day that goes down the street with all the crazy welded shit. And same thing, it was like the way I could contribute, because I can't weld. And so, and then the middle side is a t-shirt I did for Maximum Rock and Roll, and they are also not a print magazine anymore, but they're still online, I think. And they gave me like an artist residency and were really great to me. And I think all of this is just like, if you put your time into DIY spaces, like they will want to give back to you. And in that way, like I couldn't do anything in this city probably if I hadn't worked at Extreme Noise, because they've been so supportive of me being an artist. Dead Media, same thing. It was a record store. Just wanted to help. Food Chair, I started volunteering maybe 2.5 years ago. A couple of my friends started this organization to help feed neighbors on the streets every Monday, and it turned into a thing where it's now 4 days a week. But I started cooking like after. I think I started making art to contribute, and this is like 2 different t-shirts. The one on the left is like all Miyazaki ripoff stuff that I'm probably not even allowed to show in a museum. But I haven't even printed it. And then the other one, yeah, it's all just fundraiser stuff. This was a shirt I made during the uprising to try and do something, because I think anybody that is at all like a person felt insane during that time, and a lot of us didn't know what to do to help. And so I did this as a fundraiser for like this trans youth center in New York, even, because I don't know. I don't remember why I picked it, but it felt cool to just be able to do that and then have everyone in the community that also didn't know how to help, like, buy a t-shirt. And I don't know. So yeah, I guess that became like a community involvement thing. And then flyers. When I first moved here, I was doing primarily all black and white, like brush pen stuff. And it switched to screen printing. I don't even remember how, but I got a screen printing space in Northeast. And the Ice Age flyer is the first flyer that Extreme Noise ever asked me to make. And I remember it was a pretty big deal for me, because I think like being asked to make flyers for some reason is way more fun than when you just decide you're gonna do it. And I think they gave me like money to buy paper, which was really good back then because I didn't have any money. But I remember making that and being really proud of it. And at the time I really liked Ice Age, and I went to the show. And I remember the tour manager of this, like, there was this weird Danish band or something. I was like, oh, I made all these sick screen prints. Probably didn't say sick. But I was like, do you want to take some for the band? And the guy just kind of like scoffed at me and was like, they're going to lose them. And I was like, okay. And that just kind of also was a funny thing where I realized that I was putting more weight on physical flyer importance than this random guy that was driving this band. So I don't even know if they ever saw it, but screen printing started to become my main vehicle for everything. And I guess at the same time, like, everybody had started this punk house called House of Lard, and every show was pretty much at Lard. So I think because that was like my friend group and my age group, I ended up making mostly, like, all my flyers pretty much were for Lard for a long time. And I just picked random ones. And this May Day show was maybe the most memorable Lard show ever, because it was on May Day, and the SWAT police came and surrounded the entire place. While we were all inside, there was like 400 or 500 punks everywhere. And the only other time I'd ever been like surrounded by SWAT police was during the RNC. Also just sleeping, like we weren't doing anything. But it was crazy to be like, we're all just at a punk show, and now the SWAT police are here with weapons. And so that was a crazy show. And then we had a warehouse for a while called Secret Service, and that was a really big show that happened there that was like 600 people or something came. Pretty insane. The last Wild Child show, last Brain Tumor show, who for me were like the biggest bands here. They were my closest friends, and I made like a lot of art for them. Frozen Teens, last show, maybe not, I don't remember. And then I switch over to showing my transition to digital art. So I like got an iPad 2 years ago because I tattoo for a living, and it was the transitional tool that I needed to make it easy to make stencils, because I was doing it by hand for 7 years and it was getting really bad. Like, it took too long. And I discovered that I suddenly loved using it because I am so ADD that sometimes my ideas will never even get close to coming on the paper because I'll forget them by the time I've erased a line 7 times. And so having access to a tool that just lets me make exactly what I want incredibly fast so that I have the idea out and then go from there is pretty amazing. So that's the May Day show last year that I do with my friend Connor. We book it and work on it. And this is the May Day show this year, in case you want to go. That's an old flyer. That's I guess, pen and ink versus digital. They're very different, but also not that different. And then this is the first 7-inch cover I ever made here for my friend's band Wild Child. And that was super important for me. Just the first time I ever got to put my art on a record for a band that I loved. And it was my favorite hardcore band here. And Brain Tumors, same. We were all just a part of this little scene at Lard, and that was, I don't know. I think that was a t-shirt and a record insert, and then the far one is also the next 7-inch I got to do, which I also screen printed all by myself at the U's Print Center, which I was not supposed to be at. And Lard Boys, I think it's obvious they all lived at Lard. And Surrogates, I put next to it because I also have friends that I just made art for, and that's a digital one that I made. And I think that's the closest digital art I've gotten to looking like my old pen and ink art. And now I'm going to go to just my personal art. And I haven't even looked at my notes. But I guess I worked at Modern Times, which is a punk cafe. If you haven't been there for years, I was a line cook for 10 years. And that was also my hub, kind of, besides Extreme Noise, where I think I had 10 art shows at Modern Times. And that was the only place I ever thought would show my art. Because, I don't know, because it's a punk cafe. And then eventually when you're doing art for people in a DIY scene for a really long time, you start to kind of believe that that's the only people that will ever look at your art or respect your art. And so I just got really used to that. But I was doing a lot of fine art, a lot of mixed media stuff like this. In between the screen printing, kind of trying to figure out if I was going to be able to do anything with it. And it never really worked out, which is how I started tattooing. Is I figured out people will pay you for a tattoo, but they will not buy a painting, which I understand now because I won't either. And then in between that, I started making pants, and I made t-shirts. Joe showed a bunch of his t-shirts. I didn't even put t-shirts, but I started drawing on pants as a alternative income source when I didn't want to cook. And it was really fun at first, and then it just became incredibly taxing because I can't stop. I'm too obsessive, and I put too much time into it, and then you end up selling something for nothing because nobody will pay for it and realize it's stupid, and it really is just an outlet. But it was fun for a while to make pants. And this is kind of this is from the calendar I made 2 years ago, and this is, I'd say, how I perceive my art. This is what I care about the most. I feel like this is my most important work. I don't know if it's funny. I think it's hilarious. Everything in it is referential to something. It's all political. It's all satire. It's creepy. I don't know. And I don't know. I can't wait till I can tattoo this good. But this is also all digital, and I don't think I ever could have made this art without a digital machine to do it with. And that is also really hard for me because most of my art, like Joe, has been anti-technology for a really long time. And everything just makes fun of everything. And then using a computer to now draw is making me feel really embarrassed, but now I think it's the coolest thing that ever happened. Because it works. It's so easy to just have an idea become art. And it's really good for people that get distracted really fast. these are some examples of my tattoos, and I think as a medium, it is really funny to show them because even though that is my career now and that is what I love to do the most, I'm also like still in a phase of my career where I'm limited by not being a master of the tattoo machine. So like my art is a lot sillier and simpler and cuter because like it is catered to being able to create it like with the machine. And I guess I'm gonna finish this all off with like all the years that I've lived here and I've been making art in this community. I started labeling everything Plastic World to come up with this like fake company, I suppose, to make fun of myself for like trying not to be a capitalist, but also being like, I don't want to be a line cook for the rest of my life. So I'm gonna like pretend that I have a company called this and it makes fun of like credit cards and stuff and I don't know. So everything has been that at some point, and it was like when I was doing flyers, when I was making zines, when I was screen printing, when I had a tattoo shop, like everything has been Plastic World, all my t-shirts. And so it still exists as that. It's like what I put on everything. It's what I think of my art. And then yesterday I opened my first tattoo shop with my friend Kaylee, and it's called Kaleidoscope. And it was very exciting, but it's like, now I'm like, oh shit, what do I do with Plastic World? I don't know. So, yeah, it's amazing that Extreme Noise has literally given me the opportunity to do everything, even if like it doesn't sound that way. Every time they got offered a table at a comic festival or a music fest, something like, they'd be like, we have like one magazine and like stickers, like, do you want to take the rest of our table? And I would always take the table, and that's like how I started selling my art and getting my art out there into the world. And so it's pretty amazing to have this record store be there forever. And I love punk, and I love records, and I forgot to say all that. And that's what I was doing there in the first place. But yeah, that's all I got. Thank you.
I don't have much else to end with here. Here's a picture of the store again. One thing I did want to end with after we heard, the longer stories of Joe and Sarah, but I think, with almost 30 years of history, Extreme Noise has got a historic long chain of punks going back many years. And a lot of people are here tonight that have been volunteers, who have done artwork that maybe you've seen here that we didn't credit them for, who have been part of the larger sort of project and scene and collective endeavor that we're talking about tonight. So I wanted to end by having anybody here who's a volunteer or somebody who did something for the store at any point. Do you want to stand up and we'll applaud, and that'll be the end of our talk? So stand up if you've been a volunteer or you are a volunteer. I think you're supposed to come back up here.
Hello. Okay. Thank you guys all again for coming. We are going to turn it straight over to questions from you all in the audience. I saw a hand shoot up right there. We'll have some microphones running down.
I can probably speak fairly loudly.
It's, sorry, we're recording, so it's for posterity. Well, thank you.
What is the current state of the punk rock scene in the Twin Cities?
This is not okay. It's doing good. I'll say that. I feel like maybe right before COVID, I was feeling a little bit depressed about it, but it's also because I'm now hit that age where I am officially old in the punk scene, or just feel that way maybe. But there wasn't really any youth, and all the spaces were ending, and what was 30 punk houses turned into 2, and we lost warehouses and all these DIY spaces. And even though it's not like it is my entire life, it has been the only place I've felt safe my entire life. So to lose all of these spaces, you lose energy, you lose like people wanting to create things, and then it starts to feel like nothing is exciting or matters anymore, and that is the end for me. So I was thinking about leaving, and then during COVID, all of a sudden when people started having shows again, I feel like that's when children just came out of everywhere. And I don't know where they came from, but it was amazing. And I remember the first show I went to, I was like, this shit is fucked up. There's kids everywhere. It was so cool. And now I'm just happy every time I go to a show because there's so many people. And it's like there are still a few spaces left holding it down. And it's amazing to have those spaces.
Other questions? Oh, right there.
I'd like to ask each of you what your favorite show flyer is. Maybe that has come out of this city. If something. You can't hear the question.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to ask all of you what your favorite show flyer is that has come out of the city.
Can you say that, Dill?
Yeah, come on,
Do
Dill.
you know?
You gotta have an answer.
You tell us first. I don't know, but some of that old profane art that we saw is just amazing. It's insane, you know. It's so sick, and I don't even know who did all of it. I think that. Sorry.
Donovan Solent did a whole bunch of it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Gary. What was the name again?
Donovan Solent.
Donovan Soland.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, and yeah. I don't know. I that's my favorite. Like Minneapolis punk art would probably be those old profane. That's the answer I'm going to give you, Dale.
I guess I'll be nice and I'll say I'm going to shout out Emily Stiles, who has not been making very much art, but made some posters that are hanging in every single punk house, and Joe. And I think
And Sarah.
that's the only reason we're talking is like there aren't that many people that have been making things at the same time as us. So it feels like we're important, but
Yeah, there was a whole generation of people before us, like Chelsea from PE2, who did some of the characters and some of the flyers that I showed, and yeah, you know, I mean, that's the sort of generation before us, but yeah.
I could definitely not pick a favorite over all the years, but there have been waves, and it's been really cool to see styles come and go. And this new wave is amazing. I really like your art. But yeah, things that I saw when I first, saw it on a telephone pole, and I was like, "Whoa, what is that?" Those things resonate with me many years later. But it's not my favorite style. It's more that it changes all the time.
Do I have to answer this question? I don't know if I have a favorite, but definitely, I like the worst looking flyers possible. So when you see the ones on the bulletin board that are just like a marker and it says here's this show is at this, and it doesn't even have a time or an address, that's my favorite.
Oh, there's a question right here.
So just hearing about kind of the logistical ways in which you have this very weird unicorn utopia of not hiring people but still existing and providing resources but being for the people at your core. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on how to make that work beyond just extreme noise. Like, I would love to see more of this in the world, and I think there's a need for things to not be so capitalist driven, but that's a lofty goal. Sometimes it feels like, for me at least, and so I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on what makes it work.
I have a little bit of a thought. I've been thinking about how we're talking about music. It's just it's records. It's a record store. It's not like this isn't like we're not like. it's not saving people's lives or something like seemingly really important. Like, but I think it's something in the music. I think it's something in music that was able to create that. There's like some force and some, you know, this like these inherent ideas in the music itself that has allowed this to exist. And it's something I've sort of been thinking about as we were doing this. I don't know if that answers it exactly or gives you hope for finding other businesses or whatever, but yeah.
I mean, I think one thing, just from my own personal experience with it, some of what we're talking about is that, you know, when we say that the store doesn't provide a living for anybody, it's nobody's like main vocation. And in fact, I think, you know, I wouldn't want it to be. I wouldn't want to be I don't want to be a professional punk because what I get paid for, I don't want that to be crossed with the stuff that I love, because that's, you know, when I try to explain the kind of like non-commercial, anti-mainstream ethos, a lot of that impressed upon me this idea that it was like a corrupt notion, and that like what you did for your job is not going to be what's, you know, or what you love is not going to be what you love, and what you love isn't going to make you money ever. And the store is kind of like, I don't know if that's fatalism, you know, like, but it is premised on this idea that like, commercially it's a failure. Like we'd never profit enough to pay even a single person to work there. But that failure is like the living, breathing heart of the punk scene, that like we're not going to be that, and we're not trying to be. And in fact, we don't want to be. Like, so I don't know. That doesn't help, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I would add to that, like, you know, we were not thinking about 30 years at the time, right? We weren't thinking, okay, what do we do? Stay around for 30 years. Opening was success, right? Like failure was okay. The risk we all took, we were all willing for that all to go away. You know, $500, $1,000, some records you donated. Okay, it's worth it. So I think maybe keeping it low risk, and also leaving it open to become a lot more than what you set out as.
I guess I will say, having been a part of a lot of different DIY collectives, like I think the only reason it works with Extreme Noise is because it isn't about like what genre of punk or hardcore you like. It just like is there. The whole store is there for you to go. And I think just music existing is a lot more important than like the politics of how to run a store in a way. Whereas like every other collective, you have to just make thousands of decisions constantly that contradict each other. And with music, it's just like, well, we all love music and we all want to go to the record store. So we're just going to keep working at the record store so that we can buy the records because that's what we like. So I don't know. Maybe that's why.
There's a person in the hat way back there.
Maybe while we wait, we have a question here.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Hello. Okay. I had a question about more like the designs specifically. So I'm seeing a lot of like very complex compositions you've got going on here, and I love all of it. And like anti-compositions, like very purposefully, as you mentioned, like if I can't even read it, that's amazing. But I'm wondering like what the process is like, you especially like directed towards the artists, of like how do you find that balance of like composition, anti-composition, and like what is your thought process or inspirations for like deciding what you're going to focus on for that particular piece?
I feel like I've never been asked that question this way, but whenever somebody asks me what my art is or like where it comes from, I just get angry immediately because I have no idea. But I think because I'm getting older and I have to think about it now, I've been kind of just, honestly, I don't know. But like, I know that all of my drawings start with like a shape, and I just start drawing a shape, and then whatever that shape seems to look good as in my head is like the direction I go. So, but then other times I'll be like, oh, I'm gonna draw like a cop on fire, or I'm gonna draw like the city flooding, or I've never even drawn that. I don't know. I don't know. It's art doesn't make any sense. Like I will say like nothing is really that planned ever. And me and Joe were talking about this earlier about how art is inside of you and it has to come out. And maybe like when punk and art mix, it's like because we're insane. And when it comes out, you have no idea what's going to come out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as far as like the composition stuff goes, like I'll definitely do things wrong intentionally. And set things up. You know, I mean, if you're sitting there with like, something's in the news, you know, and it's like, oh, they're drone bombing in, you know, whatever country, and it's awful. And so like, I want to make a drawing about that specifically right now as it's happening, you know, for a flyer that's happening soon. So that it's like, okay, get the drawing down, come up with some sort of conceptual way to tell the story that's also not too, that you can just look at and you don't have to read into it a ton, and you can make it do like have an interesting shape or something. Then you're sitting with that, but then you've ripped up all these sheets of paper and you've ripped up all these band logos and dates and stuff, and then you're just placing it around on top. You maybe have a glue stick or something, and you can just put them on top, and you can see something that's like harmonious, and you can decide, did I want harmony today, or do we want to make it look crazy? Do we want to make it challenging and you know, have that be show more of the anger of this situation and all that. And I think that I mean, yeah, it's just playing around, and I don't think Sarah or I really understand. I should speak for myself. Understand design like you know, in a like learned way, but just sort of like feeling it out. But yeah, often very like intentionally creating like a symmetry or something, but then just throwing something off to the side just to mess with the whole thing. Yeah.
There was, yeah.
Hello. Thanks for the show tonight. It's awesome. I liked hearing about the struggle about like no technology and stuff like that. And I was just thinking about like, you guys are a community, but I'm wondering like how much of this is like an urban thing? And I was just kind of wondering about like outreach to rural areas. And like, I think I always kind of picture punk bands as like, you know, they're traveling troubadours who go around and kind of spread stuff. But I was just kind of wondering about Extreme Noise's influence maybe outside of the cities in more of a rural scope, and just kind of wondering what that's been like for you guys.
I don't know if I can speak to that too well, but I do know that, like, you know, one of the things that when we talked about the store being a kind of physical space, a place to go, like for anybody coming into the city from wherever outside, rural or, you know, anywhere from South Dakota up to Winnipeg, all through, right? It's a place that people know, and we've been in the same spot now since 2001. Again, a place for people who are maybe not connected with the same circles from living in the city, can come and find out about shows, can kind of plug into what's happening in terms of, you know, new records and everything like that. So, I mean, I think just as a kind of resource, yes, we're lodged here in the urban space of Minneapolis, but in a way that because of the longevity of the store and its sort of like long-running physical spaceness gives it a way to serve that role for people, and a way to get people connected. And I know there's tons of people when they end up moving here, right, are already familiar with some of the paths and ways of navigating the scene because of being able to come to Extreme Noise and find it as this node in a larger network. Other than that, I'm not sure how else to answer that question.
I mean, it seems to me that like people, many alternative-minded people from in the Midwest come to Minneapolis. Like often, I feel like before places like Chicago, which you might think, I don't know, maybe that's wrong to say, but like within our sort of subculture or something, I feel like people from like Iowa and these places that and more rural places in Minnesota and Indiana, whatever. I've met many people like that living in Minneapolis, and I have always wondered if that's because of things like extreme noise, and so maybe that's like the outreach. But also I think a lot of like punks hitting a certain age will want to escape the urban insanity. So maybe there's more of the reverse of what you're talking about than the urban or the rural outreach program.
I think we have time for one more question. Anyone else? Oh, is he running up?
I'm curious with your volunteer business plan, how you handle some of the less artistic aspects of your business, like accounting, ordering records, paying bills, all that kind of stuff. Is like one person designated for that or somehow, or how does that work?
I am the accountant of Extreme Noise, along with Rana, who helps me with the taxes because she knows much more about them. But we have tried to make it a Skillshare, but it is a smaller group. As I said before, there's probably 20 or 30 volunteers at any given moment, but there's a smaller group of people that take on some of those more specialized tasks, and they do get, it can be a place to learn how to do that stuff. I still don't know anything about accounting really, but I've learned everything I know about it from Rana at the store. And it's we try to kind of, share those skills and some of that responsibility as much as we can. And in some ways, like, and it sounds like, oh, those are the, tasks that seem more like drudgery. So how do you get a volunteer to do it? I thought this a lot when I first started volunteering. Like, I really wanted to like clean the toilet at the store or like sweep the floors, because it was like I wanted to like serve the scene. That sounds weird, I know, but like, and now being accounting, like that's what I want to do. Like something that nobody else will do, like, or doesn't really want to do, becomes like a way of, again, kind of like proving that, like, like I'm not getting paid for this so much, I'll even do that. Like, and I mean that honestly, like, like I used to like, oh, I'm going to move the fridge and clean behind it because nobody else did that. But like, that was a way for me to like, be a part of the scene in a way that like, meant more than just something that seemed more like glamorous or interesting or something like that. I don't know. I don't know how other people have that same kind of approach, but
one thing to add to that is there have been dozens and dozens of people that have been ordering records over the years that they are very passionate about. They know a specific label in some far off place that they're going to get to the store. So they'll be empowered with a budget, maybe a small one at first, but maybe it grows over time. And they'll have that opportunity maybe for the first time in their life to order records. I hope that is helpful for them, but it's great for the store. It's like a rich tapestry of bizarre tastes. So I think that part has been really decentralized, whereas some of, Brad's doing the accounting, sorry.
Well, thank you all for coming. Thanks to the entire group from Extreme Noise on stage and in the audience.